This is the Made for Success podcast, and this is Chris Widener, speaker and author of over 15 books, including the New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller, The Angel Inside. The Made for Success podcast will help you turn your potential into performance, succeed in every area of your life, and achieve your dreams. And now, enjoy the show.
Our guest today is Tom Flick. A former NFL quarterback, Rose Bowl champion, and Pac-10 Conference Player of the Year, Tom Flick now applies his winning ways as a highly sought-after dynamic speaker. He's delivered over 2,500 presentations since 1989 to clientele including Microsoft, Safeco, Merrill Lynch, and the U.S. Rangers. As president of Tom Flick Communications and Outlook Consulting Group, Tom uses his exceptional ability to communicate clear business solutions with humor, wit, and razor-sharp insight in helping an organization define their vision, improve customer service, and develop leaders and leadership teams. He has a unique gift of connecting to not only the listener's head and habits, but their hearts as well. Welcome, Tom.
Hi, Chris. Good to see you. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, good to have you here on the show and chance to catch up. You and I have spent some time talking in the past.
We live in the same local area.
Met for coffee a few times, and so now we get to do this. So it's always fun to be able to have friends on the show. And,
thank you.
You know, I wanted to start out with a story that I personally love, as I've listened to you speak a couple of times over the last number of years, is I'd like you to start by telling us about your interaction with what many would consider one of the meanest linebackers of all time in the NFL,
Sure.
A guy by the name of Jack Lambert, Pittsburgh Steelers.
Well, you know, I was drafted by the Redskins and excited to be in the NFL, dream of a lifetime, and was on the sidelines of a game. And my rookie season, we're losing 17-0, and my coach, Joe Gibbs, came down and said, "Hey, we want you to go in. We need a jump start." And thrilled for the opportunity to play, and I grabbed my helmet and strapped it on and got a play from the coaching staff. And I hustled out onto the field and called a play. But I was taken back a little bit. I'm on the field. I'm 21, and I've got 74,000 people watching me. Called a play, went to the line of scrimmage, and since I've been a little kid playing the position of quarterback, I've been taught there's you just go into a habit mode of, you know, you scan the defense to see if you need to audibilize. And I start that process from left to right, and cornerback and outside linebacker and free safety. And then I noticed a man about 4 yards in front of me who was rather big, a big man. And it was Jack Lambert. And if you don't know Jack, or the listeners don't know Jack, it would be, at that time, 6'3", about 225, a 7-time Pro Bowl selection, 4 Super Bowl rings, consequently later voted in the Hall of Fame. So the guy's the best in the business. And not being stupid and having a degree from the University of Washington, I thought, well, okay, what do I do? And I thought, well, I'll smile at Jack and kind of build a rapport with him because I'm going to be here a while. So
rapport is big in the NFL.
It is. And so I'm kind of like, we're out here, I'm 21, I made it, and Jack's not paying attention to me. He's moving a nose tackle into the gap. And I start getting into my cadence, and we had motion and movement, and coverages are changing. And he looks up, and he sees me instead of Joe Theismann, our starting quarterback. And apparently he was caught off guard because he next pointed his finger across the line of scrimmage before the ball was snapped in my hand. He said, "Hey!" He yelled really loud. He goes, "Who are you?" at the top of his lungs. And that wasn't even the worst part, because seconds later my entire offensive line turned around to see who I was, which is even worse. My 24-second clock is ticking down, and finally got guys turned around and played the game. But I was taken aback thinking, who am I, you know? And I used that in a talk because it prompted a thought process when I flew home with my team. We lost the game, and if you've ever played sports, and you have, you know, and it's quiet, and you sit and you think and reflect, and what could have I done better? But the thought that was in my mind was, who am I? And the reason I thought that is because it became very profound. Well, who am I, and where am I going to go, and where am I going to end up, and what's life really all about? And you know, I came to understand as I've grown older in life that those are noble questions to ask, and they're also knowable. And so I prompt as kind of a kickoff sometimes when I use a talk in large conferences that story, because I then turn it around to the audience. You know, what is it that you really do? I mean, really, what is it that you do? And if you think about Disneyland, they're in the happiness business, and Make-A-Wish Foundation, they're in the business of making memories for a lifetime. And Ritz-Carlton, who's a client of ours, they start, and in my wallet I've got a little card, and no matter what discipline you are, they take that card out before they clock in, and they look at their core value, their core promise, and their purpose statement. And their purpose statement is, we are, ladies and gentlemen, serving ladies and gentlemen. which says a lot about their customers, a lot about their people. And so, you know, for us, it's really, what do we do? And I was sitting next to an insurance salesman. I didn't know at the time, but when I was flying back from Orlando about 9 months ago, and I asked people 3 questions when I'm on a plane, you know, going home or going to work?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going home. And what's your name? The guy shared his name. And then the third question is, do you mind telling me what you do? And I remember this gentleman was putting stuff in the pouch in front of him away, as there was a middle seat available between us, and I was on the aisle. And he shrugged his shoulders and sighed and said, I'm in insurance. And then he tagged that with property and casualty. And what he didn't see was, and what he saw himself was, I fill out policies, I write a lot of, you know, I push paper. And what he really did is he put people back in their homes. He put kids back in their beds where mom and dad can pull a sheet up under their chins and tuck them goodnight, and there's a roof over their head. He puts families back together, but he didn't see it that way. And so I prompt people to think, well, what is it that you really do? And so I used the Jack Lambert story to start that process of them thinking about that. So
it seems like there's 2 different things that come from that. One is, what do you really do at work? And a lot of times people say, I sell insurance, but really what they do is protect families and heritage. And then there's this other side of who are you, where somebody might say, well, I'm an insurance agent, but are you just an insurance agent? Like what I think about, particularly with professional athletes who have such a short period of time, even the ones who have long careers are done at 38. I mean, occasionally they push it into the 40s. And then all of a sudden they have an entire 2 or 3 decades where they've spent the entire time saying, I am a baseball player. But how do you get over that when all of a sudden you don't go back out on the field again?
Well, I qualify things when I speak to groups. We do training and we do educational training, and my giftedness is keynoting 1 days, 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour half days, and 1 days, team awareness, leadership, managing change. And I tell people as I begin, I've got to tell you something. Football is not who I am. It's what I used to do. Right. And I'm more proud to be a husband and a father than anything else. And then I tell them, I'm not here to make you do anything. I'm here to do something for you, and that's only if you want it, because it's all about choice. And so it's all based on the identity. And really that question, who are you, where are you going, where are you going to end up, what's life really all about, encompasses the embodiment of our life. It's our home, it's our work, it's who we are, where we walk. See, I've got a boy that's 17 soon. Joe is going to be 17 in January, and he's 6'3" almost, and Jennifer is 13, my 2 kids. And my son's looking at me, and my daughter is looking at me and watching me, and they're basically saying, Dad, where are we going? Where are we taking? Where are you taking our family? What are we all about? And what do you stand for? And I've got to be able to answer those questions for my children. And it's no different for anybody else in their families or when they go to work. What is it that you really do? Yeah. And so, I'm 48 years of age, and I've made the turn. I mean, I've played the front 9 holes of my life, and I can't see the clubhouse maybe yet, but I'm on the back 9. And when I was younger, like you, Chris, probably, and I know your heart, a lot of it was success when we were young kids. How can I be successful? And now it's about significance. How can I make an impact? Because we're going to change dollars until the day we die. Yeah. I mean, people just change dollars. So that it's got to be bigger than dollars. And I do a lot of work with Marriott, who owns Ritz. And a neat gentleman, Pete Watzka, who's become a dear friend, who oversees Ritz and Marriott side of the vacation club and the residence and whole ownership of Ritz-Carlton clubs and residences. I'm back in Orlando at corporate, and I'm, come on in. And we sit down, he puts his feet up on his desk, and there's stacks of books everywhere. He reads 2 books a week. Wow. And then he'll email me occasionally, this is the book list I'm on right now, what are you reading? And he goes, Tom, I've got enough, I've been blessed with enough money and those types of things. I want to make an impact and leave a legacy for people. And so it's a great question for us to really probe and be able to have an answer to. Yeah.
Was it difficult for you to make the transition out of all the playing, and then what was that first year like?
A young 21-year-old kid, I had the world by the tail, or thought I did. And football is a wonderful game, but it's an interesting business, and I loved it. And But I remember my second year in the league. Well, I was traded my second year in the league from the Redskins to the Patriots. And my wife at the time was flying from Seattle to come out and watch me start against Buffalo. And in the meantime, no cell phones, remember, back in the 80s.
Yeah.
I had then since been traded, went to New England and flew to Dallas to play the Cowboys, and she had no idea where I was at. It was just a strange, odd experience. But I knew the first time I got traded that I'm on borrowed time. It's a really a short-lived life. I played 7 years. The lifespan of an NFL football player is 3.3. Actuaries have figured out 3.3 years is all you get. And so at 3.4 you get vested,
right,
which is real interesting. And so I knew that I was on borrowed time. I loved every year that I was there. But when I finished, I thought, man, it's time to move on. And I left football because my mom died of cancer. I was with the Jets at the time. Got a call from my brother who said, hey, Mom's been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. She's been given, Tom, about 2 months. And so when the season ended, which is when I got the call, I hurried home. Lost about 20 pounds in 2 months, would just take long, long walks. My wife, Molly, was pregnant, so she gave birth to our first child, Joe. Mom died just very shortly after. My mom and dad have been married 48 years, just great parents. And so it was more important being a dad and taking care of my dad than playing football. And the Jets said, hey, we have mini camp starting up. You need to be back here. I said, I just have no interest. I just can't pick up a ball and life's different. I need to do something else, take care of my family. And so that's how I got out of football.
Yeah. You just mentioned your mom and your dad briefly. Tell us what life was like growing up in the Flick household.
Oh, man. You know, I got to tell you, it's a bizarre household, kind of weird in some senses. The youngest brother was a skateboard champion and surfer. Other brother was a professional skier. One's a football coach. One sister's a golfer. One plays tennis. My mom and dad were skeet shooting champions in the late 50s. My dad ranked in the top 10 in the world.
Wow.
Navy pilot, commander, yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. And loved my dad for it. Said what he meant what he said type of a person. And so it was just bizarre. And I gravitated, being 6 out of 7 on the totem pole of kids, watched my brothers play and compete, and I fell in love with football as a young kid. Told my dad when I think I was 7, after church one day, hey, Dad, I'm going to be a pro quarterback in the NFL. I mean, I went and told my dad, son, that's great.
Did he say, good luck with that? Or did he say,
no, he said, that's good.
You can do it? Or?
He said, great. But what was interesting, I told my dad that, and when I was 13, I wrote down these goals. You know, as a junior high kid, kids are starting to get involved in drugs and drinking and some odd things. And I wrote down my goals, and God bless mothers and moms. I took it to my mom. I said, Mom, here's my goals, you know, and I pasted them next to my nightstand and then in my locker. So the first and last thing I read when I got up were my goals, and when I opened my locker combination between classes, the door swung open. That's where I'm going. And told my mom, Mom, here's my goals. And she took them and she looked at them very intently, and just like only a mom can do, she looks up over and says, son, you're going to make a wonderful quarterback in the NFL. Oh. And it just moved me on my go side. I mean, it's just, wow. So I had some great parents, wonderful parents. Yeah.
You travel around the country now, 2,500 presentations since 1989. That's a lot of presentations. Yeah, it is. And yet you told me that you are by nature pretty shy.
I am. I'm real shy by nature.
So how does a person who's really shy end up giving 2,500 presentations? That's
a great question. I was the kid in class that I'm sure people who are watching the show can understand. I was a kid that blushed all the time. I'm the kid that could not talk to a girl. I'm a kid that when teachers called you in class, man, I just hated it. I would turn just bright red and start to perspire and just be so out of my skin. My dad actually nicknamed me Silent Sam because I just didn't say much. And I was comfortable on a basketball court, a baseball diamond, and a football field. I mean, that's where I could express. Yeah. And so, you know, to answer your question, how did I get to where I'm at? When I got out of football, well, let me go back. When I was a Redskin rookie, back to that again, Joe Theismann would bring a couple suits to work, a couple days a week. And he would dress down in a suit after practice. I said, where are you going? I'm going to go speak. People want me to go speak. On what? Just stuff, and he would tell me what it was. They pay for that? Yeah.
Pretty good.
And John Riggins and some of the old vets, from the old Over the Hill gang and the Redskins, I don't want to do that stuff. So I had all these excess opportunities, and I walked up to Joe, who happened to be our public relations man. I'll go do that because I'll get paid $100. And I remember one time I was at a women's lawyers conference in Washington, D.C., and I had nothing to say, and they're like, who are you and why are you even here?
Yeah. First you had Jack Lambert asking, who are you? Now you got the women's...
I did, exactly. Well said.
Who's this guy?
Who are you again? And I went home, but I realized something. There was a connection, a link at that point. I thought, wow, because why I love football is I love to lead people. Because I've learned something in life. Two things. People love to be led, and it's okay to be led if you're following the right leader, but people love to be led, and they're desirous to be led, and they love to be inspired. And that fit just my heart as a quarterback. Serve, take care of, love, lead, let's accomplish something great. And I got a link. It was in my brain, it jumped over to this part, kind of an epiphany that's almost the same thing. I'm just not in a scrimmage or a battle. I'm actually in an environment that's different, but I can still use those same traits. And so I went home from that women's lawyers convention, and I really sat and pondered and thought, and didn't think much of it, but next time I was invited to go speak, I was prepared. And then when I left the NFL from my mom passing away, I had a guy that said, hey, you need to come and join the Speakers Bureau. I've heard you speak, you're really good at it. And I said, listen, here's the deal, I'll do it. I signed a 6-month contract, I'll do it, but then I've got to get on with life's work. And after a month, I was completely booked, and I think God really, for me personally, God started to talk to my heart. And he said, I've allowed you to play sports so you can tell some stories and touch people's lives. And I felt it was a calling. So I feel like I'm called to do this. And in spite of my shyness, I'm totally comfortable on a stage. But even before our interview here, I was thinking, okay, kind of get set here.
Let's take a 20-second break to thank our sponsor, Made for Success Publishing. For listeners of this show, visit madeforsuccess.com/podcast and enjoy half off of the world's most popular personal development audiobooks. Use coupon code SUCCESS at checkout for a 50% savings. Now, back to the Made for Success podcast show.
So I'm glad you brought up the word calling, because it's interesting to me. I don't know if you remember the book called Ordering Your Private World.
Yes.
And he talks about the difference between being called and being driven in that book. And in order to become a world-class athlete, which you were in the NFL, and to achieve those kinds of things, there is a sense of, you worked hard and long hours. And very, very few people, if any, make it to that level without just really aggressively pursuing their goals and working hard. So there is this aspect of working very hard, but there can be a subtle difference between being driven for something and being called by something, and feeling a sense of mission and purpose in order to achieve those things, and this drivenness which still leaves you with some emptiness and stuff. Can you help us think about that a little bit? Because you mentioned, I feel like this is a calling for me to do. Talk a little bit about how people can really excel without ending up in that empty feeling.
Well, what's interesting about all of us here is that we've all been given different gifts and talents. There's things that you can do that I cannot do. Even if I was desirous to do them, I can't do them. I can attempt them and maybe do them okay, but it wouldn't be natural. And I've got my own skills and gifts. And I was driven to be a football player. And I worked harder than most people. I did odd things along the way to make sure that I was making sure that I was not going to leave any stone unturned, that I was going to make it. But calling is different. You ever heard the statement, work harder? When you're called, it's almost you work softer or easier, in the sense that it's a natural movement towards what you're gifted to do. And I just have a sense that, for me personally, God has called me to do this. That's the gift that He's given me. I know two things. I'm an encourager by nature. As that way as a football player, I'm that way as a husband and a father. So I encourage people. I want them to leave and walk out going, yeah, I feel good about that, or myself, or what I do. Secondly, the other aspect of I challenge people. And I bring the velvet hammer sometimes.
Right.
I don't step on toes or press backs against chairs, but encouragers don't do that. But I want them to sit up and go, yeah. And so if you have a spectrum of 10, not that one's better than 10, but if you have a spectrum here, and on the left side is motivation, and you can put any speaker or trainer you wish in that category, and on the right side, you have cognitive information. What I find too often, motivational speakers live on this motivational side, and so people go, yes, and they walk out of this controlled environment. And I call it hot bath motivation. Why? Because you're out in the snow, you're cold, you jump in a hot bath, you feel great. 10 minutes later when you get out, you're cold as a mackerel. People go back to what they know because we're all creatures of habit. But then if you live on the cognitive side, all this information, it's boring.
Right.
It doesn't inspire me to do any of that. So what I strive to do is to come right down the center of those two, where people walk out and go, yes. But they go, plus, here's 3 things I don't have in my life that need to be implemented, and here's some tools that I can do to put them in place, and some triggers that allow me to make sure that I am successful in my change to become this new person. Change is a big deal, and that's something that is critical, because many trainers or speakers will go do this. Great. When it's all over, I go out, I've got 10 emails and 20 phone calls. I'm going back into the jungle. I go back to what I know.
And they start handling those 10 emails the way
Sure.
they handled them before they went to the seminar.
Exactly. And all the information they got in the seminar is all dissipated. I mean, ask yourself a question. It's a great question. You have 2 people that face the same circumstance, and we've all seen it in our lives. Why does one succeed and the other not? Why does one, let me put it this way, why does one stop and put on his brakes, and the other releases his brakes and stays to his go side? You'll notice that I don't use positive or negative, and I don't use good or bad attitudes. I don't use those terms. I use stop and go. Why do some stop and some go? And there's some psychological reasons about how the mind works, about why we go. And so when I share information, I usually set it up under this understanding of stop and go. And people go, I do that. I do that a lot. Because all human performance is based on just basically 2 things. It's that wonderful survival mechanism that God built in us. It's the avoidance of pain, and it's the moving towards comfort. And so what we do is anytime our mind deems something as dangerous or, Chris, uncomfortable, we avoid. And so what we do is we create these compartments in our mind, and that's really, sadly, how sometimes we are prejudiced. Is because it's easier to lump people into a box. The color of your skin, your education, neighborhood you live in, car you drive. Because we order things better that way in our minds. It's not right. It's just how we do things. So what the mind does, it says, okay, here's the deal. It creates these links. Here's some questions for you. What's dangerous about getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and working out before you go to work? Second question, what's dangerous about pushing away from the table after your first helping? And here's the 3rd question. What's dangerous about making a prospecting call? And the answer to each one of those questions is, nothing's dangerous about it. But reality doesn't matter. If we deem it as dangerous, because our mind creates links. If I get up at 5, I'm going to be tired. If I push away from the table, I'm going to be hungry. And God knows that if I make a prospecting call, I'm going to get rejected. Right. And so we'll go do something else. We're so inefficient. I tell people, and my son coined a great phrase. He said years ago, Dad, I think someday I'm going to die of a terminal case of permanent potential. Because that's all you say to me, Dad, is how much potential I've got. Well, he's got potential. I want effectiveness out of my son.
Yeah.
And I like to say you lose with potential, but you win with effectiveness. So change is a big deal. How to stay on our go side.
So how do you help them do that? I mean, okay, so they come in, they
Sure.
hear you, and then you're already saying, okay, but if something doesn't happen, they go back and they start doing the same way. What has to happen? What is the process? People watching, they're saying, I want to stop smoking, I want to lose weight, I want to be a better time manager, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et al. What can they do?
Great question. Well, first of all, we need to understand a couple of things. If we understand why we stop and why we go, it creates an awareness. And I like to say that where there's awareness, there's accountability. I know I do that. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I get it. So that's a big part of unlocking this, releasing the brakes so we can move forward. There are some other basic things that allow us to move forward, and some basic essentials in life. I mean, really, how to stay on that go side really is about how we talk to ourselves. For instance, try not to think of the Eiffel Tower right now.
Right. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Try not to think of the Grand Canyon. Why don't you think instead of a juicy lemon that's on your countertop, and you roll it, and you take a serrated knife and you cut it, and you breathe in deeply the citrus, and you take a big, deep, fleshy bite in the back of your mouth. We're all salivating, or should, because words create pictures, and pictures create emotions, and emotions create behaviors, and behaviors permit attitudes. We're nothing but creatures of habits. Excuse me. Behaviors permit habits. You and I are creatures of habit. 90% of our day is based habitually on what we do all the time. I've driven lots of times. Many people have. You ever driven and you stop your car and you turn off the key and you say, I can't remember the last 3 miles I just drove. And then you say, I hope there wasn't an accident.
Right.
But you can't remember.
Right.
And yet, if we rent a car in Denver or LA or New York, and we get it from the rental agency, and I've got my map and my directions, I'm sitting erect in my seat, my hands are on the wheel 10 and 2, all my mirrors are adjusted, and the radio's off, because I'm living in that 10% conscious state, and it's very hard. And so to change, we need to live in a conscious state. We get too habitual about things, and so if your waste can's on the left side of the office, move it to the right. You'll pitch paper, over there for a week where it used to be, and you'll blame probably me for it because I told you to move it, but in 3 weeks it was always there. Move your watch on the side of your wrist. Brush your teeth with your left hands. Go to bed early and get on the other side of the bed and see what your spouse does. Try that one. Go to bed early and let's go to bed on your spouse's side of the bed and see what happens. Yeah. And so anyway, words stop us, or words release us, because words are nothing but tools that predict and perpetuate the future.
So is it really, and I know some speakers say, stand in front of the mirror and say, I'm great, or, is it merely the saying of the words that changes the thoughts, which changes
I got to be honest with you, and a lot of motivational stuff I just don't care for.
Yeah.
I just don't care for it. I sometimes don't believe the people that are saying them. I just don't. Credibility, and sometimes it's just this, put on a happy, smiley face and let's just go out and be blithely run around the world and everything's A-okay. I'm more of a realist about stuff like that. And so, I can put my son to a stop sign immediately. And it's not all words. I haven't even gotten into the 4 things that really release us. But I can put Joe to his dependency side or stop side easily by saying, I've heard that before. That's a bad idea. There's no way. You're not going to do it. Put you to your stop sign. When my mom told me, son, you're going to make an awesome quarterback in the NFL. Here's a question. Did it put me to my stop side or go side?
Go side.
Yeah. I was go all the way. Yeah. She was seeing me what I could become, not what I was, And so words are a big deal. And consequently, so there's killer phrases, and I like to call them igniter phrases. How to get people to the go side. And some of the best go statements are, it could be a list of them. Great idea, good job, way to go. But some of the greatest go statements are, I'm sorry, or I blew it. I made a great mistake. One of the greatest leadership traits in corporate America for corporate leaders is humility. I don't have the right answers. I don't know that. I'll go find out and come back and resource you and tell you and provide that information. But I don't know. And people go, he's real. I can relate to him. I'll follow him. I'll go to war with him.
Yeah.
So,
what are the 4 steps towards getting to your go side?
I think what they are, Chris, and what I believe them to be, and if you look at research, and just in my own life, if you read some great books like Jim Collins' Good to Great, and you get into stuff like that, it's really a vision. And, it's used so loose and so often that we just go, oh, gosh, not this again.
The vision thing.
But you know what it is? It's the freedom to dream dreams and manage those dreams into reality. Essentially, it's creating a belief system that moves us from a present state where we happen to be to a future place of more value. And it's a dream. That's what it is. People call it vision. I call it a dream, because it's being able to see where we're going. And as corporate leaders, as I work with leadership teams, and I do a lot with Ritz-Carlton and Marriott and companies, and my partners do the same. Their job really as leaders is to cast reality, future reality. Why do I want to go there unless it's not compelling? And so as you cast that vision, that's your job, is to create this new belief system, this new picture. And really what you're trying to do is say, you know, this is where we're going. And leaders are really bridge builders, and their job is to build this bridge across the bay. But what's critical about it now is to allow the other people below them to put the guardrails on the side of the bridge to make it safe for them to cross. It's a concept of this, achieving your goals for their reasons.
Thanks for listening to the Made for Success podcast. Get to know us at madeforsuccess.com/podcast. Meet the hosts of the Made for Success podcast and pick up a free copy of the Totally Motivated ebook by Chris Widener. We will see you next time on the Made for Success podcast.